It started with nothing more than a desperate dream. She was just another broke student, drowning in tuition fees, living on instant noodles, and scrolling through late-night listings she knew she could never afford. But then, there it was. An abandoned farmhouse on the edge of town, listed for barely more than the price of a used laptop. Everyone said it was a waste of money, a broken-down shell better left to rot. But something about the place called to her, almost like it was waiting for her. With her last few dollars, she took the gamble. No one could understand why. The roof sagged, the shutters hung loose, and weeds clawed up through the cracked foundation. But as she stepped inside, she swore she felt the air shift. Dust hung like ghosts in the sunlight, and every creak of the floorboards seemed to whisper secrets too old to be remembered. She told herself it was just a fixer-upper, a project to distract her from the chaos of student life. Yet the deeper she explored, the stranger it felt. The walls carried scars of time, scratches, names carved into the wood, faded family portraits left behind. Every corner seemed heavy with memory. And then she reached the attic. The hatch groaned as she pulled it open, the ladder shivering under her weight. At first it looked empty, just boxes collapsing in on themselves, and the smell of dust so thick it made her cough. But behind a pile of broken furniture, she saw it. A locked trunk, blackened with age, hidden away as though no one ever meant it to be found. Her heart pounded as she dragged it into the light. The lock had long rusted, brittle and weak. With one sharp kick, it gave way, and what spilled out made her freeze. This wasn't just forgotten junk. This was something that would change her life forever. The farmhouse wasn't abandoned after all. It was keeping a secret, and she had just opened the door to it. For a long moment, she just knelt there in the attic, frozen. The trunk sat wide open, its contents spilling like a secret that had waited decades for someone to finally hear it. Old photographs, yellowed letters, and bundles of notebooks filled the air with the faint smell of mildew and ink. Each page she touched seemed to hum with a weight she couldn't explain, as if the past itself was pressing into her hands. She wasn't a stranger to hardship. Her life had always been a battle against scarcity. Growing up, her family moved from rental to rental, never settling, always chasing stability that never came. Maybe that was why she jumped to the farmhouse, why she saw hope in something others called worthless. To her, it wasn't just a broken house. It was a chance to finally belong somewhere, to plant roots in soil no one could take away. But the deeper she dug into the trunk, the more she realized this wasn't just about her anymore. The notebooks weren't filled with random scribbles. They documented something, carefully, obsessively. Dates, sketches, even maps that seemed to trace the land around the farmhouse. And the letters, they weren't written like normal correspondence. They read more like warnings. Pages stained with frantic handwriting spoke of things that must stay hidden and must never be unearthed. Her stomach knotted as she pieced the fragments together. Why would someone leave behind something so carefully hidden, and why lock it away instead of destroying it? Whoever lived here before her must have been carrying a secret heavy enough to risk everything just to keep it buried. Every sound of the house seemed sharper now. The groan of a rafter in the wind, the scratch of a loose branch against a window, it all felt alive, watching. She told herself she was imagining things, but deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that opening that trunk hadn't just revealed the past. It had disturbed it. Her pulse quickened as she shoved the last letter back inside, pushing the lid halfway closed. For the first time, she wondered if buying this place hadn't been luck at all, but a trap. A trap laid long before she ever walked into that dusty listing. And as she stood in the silence of the attic, one thought consumed her. If the letters were right, then whatever was hidden here wasn't meant to be found. She barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the trunk, the pages, the strange maps. The farmhouse groaned and shifted like it was alive, and each creak made her sit up, straining to hear footsteps that never came. By morning, her rational mind tried to convince her she had overreacted. It was just junk left behind by people who no longer mattered. But her heart knew better. She couldn't shake the feeling that the trunk had been waiting for her. At the university, She tried to focus on her classes, but the words on the whiteboard blurred into nothing. A part of her wanted to tell someone, to share what she had found, but she stopped herself. Who would believe her? She already carried the reputation of being the desperate scholarship kid, the one who stretched every dollar and never quite fit in with the rest. If she admitted she had bought a collapsing farmhouse and was obsessing over dusty letters, they'd laugh. Or worse, they'd take it from her. Yet, she couldn't help confiding in one person, Liam. He wasn't her boyfriend, not really, but the kind of friend who had always lingered closer than most. When she told him about the trunk, his reaction wasn't laughter. His expression darkened. "You shouldn't mess with that," he said quietly, almost too quickly, like the warning had been waiting on his tongue. That unsettled her. How could he know? But before she could press, he brushed it off, claiming he'd just heard stories about old farmhouses in the area. That only made her want to dig deeper. Back at the farmhouse, she noticed details she had missed before. A locked door in the basement she hadn't thought much about. Scratches on the wood of the attic beams that weren't random. They looked deliberate, like someone had carved symbols into the structure itself. And the photographs, the more she looked at them, the more she realized the same figure kept appearing in the background. Blurry, sometimes just a silhouette, but always there. The deeper she went, the more she felt caught between two fears, leaving everything as it was and never knowing the truth, or pulling the thread that could unravel something she might not be able to control. A moral dilemma weighed on her. Was she chasing answers out of necessity or out of obsession? Maybe the farmhouse wasn't her chance at a new beginning. It was her weakness laid bare. Her craving for permanence, for belonging, might be blinding her to the danger written plainly in those letters. Still, late that night, she found herself back in the attic, flashlight trembling in her hand. She pressed the beam against the walls, against the floorboards, as if daring the house to reveal what it was hiding. And when the light fell on something small, an object wedged deep between the boards that hadn't been there before, her breath caught. The farmhouse wasn't done with her. Not yet. Her fingers brushed the object wedged between the floorboards. Cold. Metallic. She tugged it free, her breath shallow in the still attic air. It was a key. Old. Iron. Heavier than it should have been. Its teeth were jagged, oddly shaped, not like any door key she had seen before. The basement. Her mind snapped to the locked door below, the one she had avoided since moving in. The key seemed almost too perfect, as if it had been waiting. She clutched it in her fist, but instead of triumph, dread seeped in. This wasn't discovery. This was invitation. The days that followed blurred into restless nights. She avoided telling Liam about the key. He had grown distant anyway, evasive, almost irritated whenever she mentioned the farmhouse. He didn't come around as often, and when he did, he never went inside. He lingered on the porch, arms folded, eyes scanning the property like he expected something or someone to appear. One evening, she confronted him. "Why are you acting like you already know something?" He hesitated too long. Finally, he muttered, "Because I do." But before she could press, he shut down, leaving her with more questions. Alone in the silence of the house, the air thickened. Shadows stretched too long. Footsteps echoed faintly when she moved, like the house was mocking her. She found herself whispering into the dark. Who lived here before me? But of course, the house never answered. The trunk in the attic loomed larger in her thoughts, the letters circling in her mind like vultures. Must stay hidden, must never be unearthed. And then came the sound. Late one night, as rain hammered the roof, she heard it, metal against metal. A faint clink rising from below. From the basement. She froze, heart racing. The locked door. The one she hadn't dared approach. Something was moving down there. Her flashlight beam quivered as she crept down the stairs. Key clenched so tightly in her palm it bit into her skin. The house groaned louder than ever, as if straining under the storm, or resisting her. She reached the basement door. The scratching stopped. Silence pressed in, heavier than the storm outside. Her pulse thundered in her ears. The key slid into the lock with a sickening ease. Too smooth, like it had been waiting for this moment all along. She turned it. Click! The door groaned open an inch, releasing a draft of air so cold it burned her lungs. She raised the flashlight. Her hand trembled, and just before she pushed the door wider, she heard it, soft, low, unmistakable. A whisper from the darkness below. Her breath hitched. The basement wasn't empty. The whisper froze her in place. At first, she thought it was the storm tricking her ears. But no, the sound was deliberate, shaped like words. She strained to hear. A name. Her name. The flashlight trembled in her hand as she forced the door wider. The beam swept over stone walls, rusted pipes, and stairs descending into thick darkness. Then movement. A shadow shifted just beyond the edge of the light. Her instinct screamed to slam the door shut, but before she could move, a hand clamped her shoulder. She spun around, nearly dropping the light. Liam. His face was pale, eyes wide, rain dripping from his jacket. He'd come without warning, without knocking. Don't go down there, he hissed. His grip tightened. You don't understand. She yanked free. Then make me understand. His jaw clenched, torn between speaking and silence. And then, as the storm roared outside, he confessed, my family owned this house. Generations ago. We left it behind for a reason. You weren't supposed to find it. The words struck like a blade. All this time, he had known. The warnings in the letters, the symbols, the whispers, they weren't just random relics. They were part of his history, and he had kept it from her. Why didn't you tell me? She demanded, voice breaking. Because you wouldn't have stayed away, he snapped. You would have done exactly what you're doing now, opening doors that were never meant to open. But before she could answer, something below stirred again. Louder this time. A scraping, dragging sound, like something alive and ancient shifting in the dark. The basement seemed to exhale, a breath that smelled of damp earth and rust. Liam grabbed her wrist. We have to leave. Now. But she pulled back, heart hammering. Leave? After risking everything? After sinking her last hope into this place? No. She couldn't walk away without knowing the truth. Her choice splintered the moment in two, flight or descent. And just as she wavered, the flashlight flickered. For a fraction of a second, the beam cut through the black and landed on something at the bottom of the stairs. Not an object, not an animal, a figure, standing, watching. Her scream caught in her throat. When the light steadied, the shape was gone. Only the dripping silence of the basement remained. Liam's grip tightened again, desperation in his eyes. Please, if you go down there, you'll never come back. But deep down, she knew the truth. She already belonged to the house. Her chest heaved as she stared into the darkness of the basement. The storm outside rattled the farmhouse walls, but it was nothing compared to the pounding in her ears. Liam's words clung to her. You'll never come back. But she was past the point of retreat. This place wasn't just a crumbling farmhouse anymore. It was a mirror of her own hunger. To belong. To uncover the truth. To finally own something that mattered. She tore her wrist free from his grip, the iron key still clenched in her fist. I have to know, she whispered, though her voice shook. Step by step, she descended. The flashlight's beam danced across the stone walls, catching fragments of carved symbols like those in the attic, their edges sharp and angry. The air grew colder, thicker, as if she were walking into the lungs of something alive. Liam followed reluctantly, his footsteps hesitant. You don't understand what they bound down here, he said, his voice breaking. It wasn't just a house. It was a prison. The scraping sound came again, closer this time, echoing off the damp walls. And then the flashlight found it. A figure huddled in the corner. Not alive, but not entirely gone either. Its skin pale, stretched thin, eyes wide and unblinking. Not quite human. She froze. The letters, the maps, the carvings. They weren't warnings, they were instructions. The previous family hadn't just lived here. They had contained something. The figure lifted its head slowly, lips parting. And then, in a voice that rasped like broken glass, it spoke her name. Her knees buckled. How could it know her? Liam shoved past her, standing between her and the thing. It's been calling new owners for years, he said. It wants someone desperate enough to let it out. That's why you found this place. The truth hit her like a blow. She hadn't chosen the farmhouse. The farmhouse had chosen her. The figure shifted forward, dragging itself across the floor, the chains clinking faintly. "Free me," it whispered, "and everything you lost will be yours. Belonging, roots, a future." Her hand shook as she raised the key. She could end her struggle in one turn, bind herself to the promise it offered. Or she could seal the basement again, destroy the chance she had gambled everything for. Tears blurred her vision. For one breathless moment, she thought of her empty bank account, the years of scraping by, the hunger to finally be more than a guest in her own life. Then, she turned the key, not to unlock, but to lock. She slammed the basement door shut and twisted it hard, the echo reverberating like a gunshot. The whispering stopped. Silence swallowed the house. She collapsed against the wall, sobbing, as Liam stood over her, relieved but haunted. "It'll wait," he said softly. "It always does." Her blood ran cold, because when she lifted her hand, the key was gone. And somewhere deep in the attic, the trunk creaked open again. The storm faded by morning. The farmhouse stood silent, its walls heavy with the secrets they now carried together. She and Liam hadn't spoken much after the basement door was sealed. There was nothing left to say. The truth lingered between them like smoke. She hadn't stumbled upon the house by chance. She had been chosen, drawn into something older, darker, and far more patient than either of them could fully understand. In the days that followed, life returned in fragments. She went back to her classes, back to the rhythm of studying and scraping by. Yet something in her had shifted. The farmhouse was no longer a dream of belonging. It was a reminder that desperation can make you vulnerable to promises too dangerous to keep. Liam visited once more. They stood on the porch, the fields stretching quiet and endless around them. "You did the right thing," he told her. "Most people wouldn't have walked away." His voice carried both pride and sorrow, because they both knew the house wasn't finished. It was waiting. It always would be. She thought of the trunk in the attic, of the vanished key, of the whisper that had called her name. A part of her feared that one day she might not be strong enough to resist. But another part, the part that had chosen to close the door, knew she was stronger than the house expected. The farmhouse, with all its shadows and scars, wasn't the salvation she had hoped for, but it had taught her something more valuable, that no place, no possession, no inheritance could define her worth. She didn't need to gamble her life for roots. She could build them herself, piece by fragile piece. As the sun set behind the broken barn and the golden fields glowed with fading light, she whispered into the wind, not to the house, not to the whispers below, but to herself, "I belong wherever I choose to stand." And maybe that was the real escape. So, the next time life tempts you with something too easy, too perfect, or too mysterious, remember her story. Remember that what promises to fix everything may cost you everything. And if you ever find yourself standing at the edge of choice that feels like a trap, listen to the voice that says walk away. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is leave the door closed. If you were drawn in by this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us uncover more tales just like this, where mystery meets the human heart and where every choice can change everything.